A heavy thud echoed against the wall. Startled, I instinctively lifted my gaze to the old tapestry with intricate patterns hanging above the bed. The shouting that had been rising in volume moments before seemed to have reached its peak. While I could barely make out a few words earlier, now it all blended into one continuous hiss. My heart pounded with anxiety and fear. The neighbors' quarrels across the street had become a regular occurrence for me, yet I still hadn't grown accustomed to their bitter arguments. I had been living in this old 8-story building for 2 months. I had to leave my childhood home. I simply couldn't live under the same roof with my dad's new girlfriend, who was only about 5 years older than me. I was grateful to my father for gifting me a small 1-bedroom apartment for my 18th birthday, insisting he didn't want his daughter stuck in some questionable dormitory. But perhaps a dormitory would have been quieter. At first, the new place suited me perfectly. There was a supermarket on the ground floor, the university was just a short walk away, and a man-made lake and park nearby, where I often took slow evening strolls. I was surprised that an apartment in such a nice area was so cheap. A week later, I found out why. It all came down to apartment number 38. Not only our entrance, but the whole building, and even the yard, knew the residents of that ill-famed apartment well. There lived the Banco couple, wife Lyudmila, or simply Lucy, a heavy-set woman of indeterminate age. She was flabby, with constant bruises under her eyes, yellowish skin, and seemingly owned only one colorful robe with a large patch over her belly. Her pale, light hair always stuck out in a chaotic mess, as if it had never met a comb or soap. Her voice was low and hoarse. Even without seeing her, you might think it belonged to an elderly man. Her husband, Vasily, was the opposite. Thin, lanky, with enormous bags under his eyes that could have held a couple of potatoes. His swollen nose drooped over his upper lip, while his lower lip always hung slack. Behind his protruding ears sprouted sparse, colorless tufts of hair. Unlike his wife, Vasily sometimes changed his worn-out undershirts for other equally unclean t-shirts. The first time I met Lyudmila, or rather found her, she was lying near the entrance to the building. Her robe had ridden up to her underwear. Fresh scrapes covered her knees, probably from a recent fall. But she seemed not to care at all. Lying on the dusty pavement like an overturned turtle, she muttered something incoherent. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I ran up to her, setting my grocery bags down, shooting a disapproving look at a neighbor from the 3rd floor unloading bags from her car. "Don't bother with her," the neighbor said loudly, slamming her trunk shut. "She's just local drunk trash. Her husband will come and deal with her." And indeed, a minute later, Vasily appeared from around the corner, leaning on the wall with one hand. In the other, he clenched a crumpled black bag jingling with glass bottles. His head trembled slightly, his legs spread wide for balance. "Lucy," he shouted hoarsely. "Lucy, what's wrong, Vasya?" She moaned, raising her hands. "Help me, darling. I fell." "God, when will you both get drunk to death already?" the neighbor grumbled, spitting on the ground and entering the building. I followed her inside, not wanting to watch the Banco's drama any longer. Since then, I often saw them alternately sprawled around the yard, and once, when leaving my apartment, I accidentally slammed the door on Vasily's head. He was curled up peacefully in the shared hallway, having wet himself profusely. Sometimes, I ran into their guests in the entrance, people as unpleasant as the bancos themselves. Not only did they reek, but they could suddenly erupt into curses or even soil the stairwell. It was scary to leave the apartment, especially for children and the elderly. I can't recall a single day when the banco couple was sober. They might have terrible fights in the morning, often turning physical, and by evening, they'd make up passionately. Or the other way around. This sweet couple reminded me of a troll and a goblin poisoning the life of a small village, in this case, an entire building entrance. And the worst part was that no one could do anything about it. The police ignored neighbors' complaints. The local officer waved it off, saying it wasn't his jurisdiction. They're not aggressive, just drunk and passed out wherever they fall, he said. Though, what exactly did he mean by not aggressive? Neighbors told me some particularly disturbing stories about the bancos. For example, how Lucy once took over the whole playground, screaming to scare away children and mothers, then started throwing stones at them. Vasily once snatched an elderly man's cane and hit him several times on the back. Surprisingly, nothing ever came of these incidents for the bancos. I watched from my window as the perpetually drunk couple, Banco, pounced on a deliveryman with pink backpack for no apparent reason. However, what was truly horrific was something I found near the trash chute on the second floor. There lay the mutilated corpse of a stray cat, its blood trail leading straight to apartment number 38. When accused of killing it, both bancos simply laughed and even threatened that they would butcher all other homeless cats fed by elderly women in our building. Eventually, I decided to publish their story online, detailing police inaction and sparking public outrage. Many comments suggested contacting a popular TV show on Channel 1. Seriously considering this option, I discussed it with some neighbors who were supportive. But unfortunately, recently, returning home after classes feeling pleased about receiving high praise for my report on Sure cuneiform script, I savored the dry, warm weather and thought about taking a walk around the lake with my friend. Approaching the entrance, I slowed down, searching for keys in my bag. The usual bench where chatty grandmothers sat was hidden behind parked cars. However, that day it wasn't occupied by them. As I rounded the car, I froze, hand clutching my purse. The entire bench was taken up by the Banco couple. A tall bottle of vodka stood next to an overturned trash can, nearly empty at the bottom. Clearly, they had already consumed enough alcohol. Watching them sent shivers through me. The couple sat close together, one leg of Lucy draped across Vasia's bony knees. Her blouse unbuttoned almost to her navel, while his right hand roamed under the thin fabric, massaging her fleshy breast. They kissed passionately, smacking loudly like trying to devour each other's tongues. Breaking away from him, Lucy gasped heavily as if she'd run a marathon. "Do you remember?" whispered Vasia, pressing his nose into her cheek. "How we did it against the fence in the village." "I do, Vasechka," rasped Lucy, dropping her raised leg onto the ground. Replacing it, her hand slipped inside Vasia's dirty pants and began rubbing vigorously. He groaned loudly. Feeling nauseous, I snapped out of shock. Tightening my grip on the keys until they dug painfully into my palm, I rushed toward the door. Trying not to look at them, I pressed the electronic key into the lock and hurriedly entered the dim hallway, exhaling sharply when realizing I'd been holding my breath in disgust. Just imagine, right there in plain sight, mere meters from a children's playground. Shouldering my bag, I started climbing the stairs. Normally, I avoided using the elevator since it's only 2 floors anyway. As soon as I reached the first landing, the intercom buzzed. Light flooded briefly into the stairwell as someone opened the front door. Curious who else might be coming home, maybe greeting them politely, I turned back slightly. In the bright rectangle of daylight, a lanky, stooped figure with long, spindly arms appeared. It darted towards me too quickly. Before I could react fully, fingers reeking of fried fat grabbed my hair tightly and slammed my head hard against the wall. My ears rang deafeningly, vision blurred momentarily. Then I realized I was falling down the stairs, counting several steps with bruised knees before hitting my shoulder painfully. Instinctively curling into myself, I tried desperately to protect myself. Terror gripped me. My heart raced wildly. The right side of my head throbbed excruciatingly. Blurring tears prevented clear focus. Crawling weakly toward the exit, gasping for help, another kick landed squarely in my ribs, knocking the air completely out of me. Crumpling again, curled up defensively, more kicks rained down mercilessly. Finally, I felt strong hands yanking my tangled hair upwards violently. His foul breath brushed my wet cheek. "You dare speak another word," he growled hoarsely, lips brushing my earlobe, "about me or my wife." He continued threateningly, promising grisly acts involving various body parts should I ever write anything further online. I nodded frantically, assuring him I would delete everything immediately. Spitting directly into my face, he finally released me and stomped back outside. For what seemed hours afterward, I remained huddled on the filthy floor, sobbing hysterically. Every part of my body hurt, especially my aching head. Carefully checking for bleeding wounds, I managed to crawl to my apartment, struggling to insert the key correctly into the lock. Collapsing onto the couch without undressing, I knew then that this was undoubtedly the worst day of my life. Despite the excruciating headache and stabbing chest pain, I didn't go to the hospital. It was too frightening to leave my house, especially with Bonko's gruff voices lurking outside as if they were waiting for me to emerge. For 2 days, I lay at home, drowning in a pile of pills. I could have called an ambulance, but feared that our crazy drunk neighbors would attack both me and the medics. I hoped I'd feel better soon. Waking up this morning, I couldn't tell whether I felt any improvement or worsened. My head throbbed with tight pulses, particularly where it had hit the wall. Moving through the apartment was difficult. I clung to walls, unable to straighten my back due to sharp pains in my side. Well, maybe it's just a severe bruise, not a fracture. After swallowing more painkillers, I collapsed onto the couch with my phone. While messaging our group leader, a piercing scream erupted from next door, nearly making me drop the device. The screams made my head pound again and sent my heart racing. For about an hour, the fight continued, sometimes quieting down before rising once more. How much longer must I endure this? My empty stomach growled impatiently. Time to stand up and cook something. Besides, some medications shouldn't be taken on an empty stomach. Clenching my right hand against my torso and gritting my teeth to suppress a groan, I slowly sat up, letting my legs hang over the edge of the sofa. Grasping the armrest tightly, I stood, emitting a muffled grunt when a brief flash of pain shot under my left breastbone, momentarily blurring my vision, accompanied by relentless banging on the wall and pig-like squeals. I hobbled into the kitchen. I should have bought earplugs long ago. People suggested them often enough. Opening the fridge, I grimaced in disappointment. Only a couple of days without shopping, yet there was nothing edible inside. Just a packet of milk, a bottle of kefir, a few jars brought by a friend, and a rotten salad. This wouldn't fill me up. Fine, I'll take a risk. Need to order delivery and hope Banco doesn't attack the courier again. I definitely can't make it to the store myself. Not only am I incapable physically, but my face is also disfigured after being beaten. Pale skin, dark circles under my eyes. I look like a panda now. It's embarrassing to show my face in public. While awaiting delivery, I was glad that Banco finally shut up. They weren't visible in the yard either. Their usual bench was occupied by elderly neighbors instead. Perhaps the couple from apartment 38 reconciled and passed out drunk. So everything will stay calm until evening. 20 minutes after placing the order, the intercom buzzed melodically. I immediately picked up because I was already hovering anxiously near the entrance. Turning the lock, pushing open the front door, I froze in shock. The old wooden door to Banco's apartment was wide open. Their place and the shared hallway were eerily silent except for the rattling elevator. Why are the neighbors' doors ajar? Did someone flee or did something happen? Curiosity overcame fear. I took a cautious step forward, crossing the threshold. Letting go of my doorknob, I leaned slightly ahead, straining my neck. What caught my eye first and instantly raised chills down my spine was a smudged palm print on the door, large splatters on faded wallpaper in the entryway, and a spreading pool of blood on dirty linoleum. Blood. Definitely blood. I knew that Banco regularly fought each other, breaking noses and lips, biting and scratching. But there's far too much blood here. It seemed excessive. I trembled violently. My head pulsed with pain again. Still, I took another hesitant step closer, aligning myself with the doorway to their terrifying flat. A smeared trail led from the bloody puddle in the hall towards the kitchen. Visible beyond the table, cluttered with bottles and leftover snacks, was Lucy's bare feet and hem of her robe. Her heels were stained red. She appeared dragged across the floor from the entrance to the kitchen. As much as I despised Lucy, she was still human and needed help. Biting my lip nervously, I prepared to call her name softly. Then, as though reading my thoughts, Vasya emerged from behind the partition. He stopped in the doorway, silhouetted by light streaming from the window so his features remained obscured. Yet his eyes seemed to glow menacingly in the dimness. In the silence, I heard his raspy, labored breathing, resembling that of a trapped animal. His white t-shirt was saturated crimson. In his right hand, he gripped a long-handled axe, while in his left, he firmly held his wife's scalp-locked hair. Her face was deformed by a diagonal axe blow crushing her nose. One eye bulged horribly, swollen shut, the other protruded from its socket. Her tongue lolled out grotesquely. Panic surged within me. Must run, lock myself safely in my own apartment. But my feet refused to move. Paralyzed, I stood frozen, gasping ragged breaths, hot tears streaking my cheeks as I screamed internally, "Run, fool, run!" Finally, sanity returned. Hearing a loud thump, I glanced upward to see Vasya looming above me. Madness glinted in his wild gaze. Spittle dripped from his twisted mouth corners. Raising the axe high overhead, he hurled Lucy's severed head directly toward me. It flew through the air, twisting sickeningly, then crashed heavily into my forearms before falling to the floor with a wet slap. Jerking away instinctively, I stumbled backward, screaming at full lung capacity, hands shielding my face. An intense stinging sensation flared across my shoulder blade. My knees buckled beneath me, dropping me to the ground. Warm liquid trickled down my back, soaking my shirt. Looking up frantically, I saw Vasya towering over me. Eyes burning with madness, he swung the axe menacingly. Suddenly, something heavy and green collided with him, knocking him off balance. He staggered backward, slamming into a vertical water pipe. Between us landed a massive messenger bag. A young man wearing an identical bright jacket grabbed my arms, hoisting me effortlessly inside my apartment. Vasya bellowed furiously, lunging at us. The courier slammed the door shut, leaning hard against it. Through the crack, Vasya thrust his right arm inside, fingers curled like talons, clutching at the fabric of the messenger's uniform. Finding exposed flesh, he squeezed the man's throat viciously. The door shook violently, creaking ominously. Soon he'd break through. Tears mingled with sweat ran freely down my face. With one final tug, Vasya yanked his arm free. The courier quickly locked the door securely, stepping back cautiously. Bananov resumed battering the door with his axe, kicking it repeatedly. Its hinges shuddered alarmingly. Feeling nauseated by the taste of blood in my mouth and overwhelmed by terror, I sank weakly against the bathroom door. "Are you okay?" asked the courier, voice strained. "Did he hurt you badly?" "I don't know," I murmured faintly, leaning heavily against the doorframe. My left shoulder burned fiercely. Everything felt unreal, like I'd simply fallen asleep on the couch and was dreaming a nightmare. If only I could wake up. After a minute of fruitless attempts to breach my door, Bananov gave up. I heard him storming toward the stairs, axe striking the walls loudly. Was he planning to escape outside? There'd be people everywhere. "Fuck," muttered the courier, pacing restlessly. "I'm calling the police, they're not answering." "We need to warn others," I managed to say thickly. Staggering upright, using the wall for support, I headed toward the kitchen window. The room swayed dangerously, as if I were aboard a ship at sea. My legs barely supported me. The courier shouted something urgent, but I couldn't decipher his words. Buzzing filled my ears again. Tripping over a small table along the way, I clutched its edge to avoid collapsing. 2 steps later, I bumped shoulders with the refrigerator, causing cans inside to rattle and magnets to fall from the door. Finally, I reached the window and gripped the sill tightly. Blinking rapidly to clear my blurry vision, I stretched out a trembling hand towards the handle, intending to turn it and open the window. Then I would need to take in as much air as possible before screaming at people below to run and hide. Holding on to the cool plastic with clenched fingers, I glanced down into the courtyard. On such a warm, sunny day, the playground and nearby benches were empty. Instead, about 10 children of various ages scattered across the yard, shrieking and running in different directions. Playing tag? No. Crawling past the sandbox on all fours was a young woman. Beninikov followed her leisurely. Catching up, he kicked her forcefully from behind, knocking her flat on the ground. He stepped on her back, preventing her from getting up, then raised an axe, a sharp downward swing. Through the haze in my eyes, I clearly saw the blade penetrate her light-colored skull. It felt like I heard the crack of her cranium breaking. A sour taste rose in my throat. My legs weakened, buckled beneath me, and I collapsed to my knees, desperately clutching the windowsill. My fingers slipped off its smooth surface, but someone else's hands caught me under my back just in time, stopping me from falling to the floor. Still, consciousness abandoned me, plunging into darkness. The next morning, I woke up in hospital. My head throbbed in sync with heavy heartbeats. The bright room swam before my eyes. The first thing I could focus on clearly was my father's pale face. Behind him stood his young wife, nervously shifting her weight and wiping tears from her wet cheeks. I didn't quite believe she cried for me. They told me I'd lost a lot of blood. If not for courier Sasha providing first aid, they wouldn't have made it in time to save me. I partly disagreed. Without Sasha, I would have died much earlier. Later, Dad recounted that yesterday, driven mad by severe delirium tremens, Beninokhov had brutally murdered 3 people: his wife, grandmother, and their neighbor sitting on the bench downstairs. In total, 6 individuals, including myself, became victims. Vasily ran through the streets like a rabid dog, lunging at anyone he encountered, until finally being shot dead by passing DPS patrol officers. Listening to this made me feel sick. I confessed to Dad that I felt guilty. I should have tried to stop or restrain Beninokhov somehow. Maybe wrestle away his axe, or call the police repeatedly when I first heard Ludmila's screams instead of brushing them aside. That way, these deaths might have been avoided. Both my father and stepmother assured me in unison that I bore no responsibility for what happened, and that trying to confront our crazed neighbor would likely have cost me my life too. Maybe they're wrong. At least that's how I want to think. But there is one positive outcome in this horrific story. Now, apartment number 38 will be completely silent. Our building will know peace again.